Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Patti Brennan Show. Whether you have $20 or $20 million, this show is for those of you who want to protect, grow, and use your assets to live your very best lives. I am so excited about our guest today. His name is Kevin Reilly. And before I go into the formal introduction, I'd like to share a little bit of a story about how we were introduced to him and what makes him so special. We were introduced to Kevin actually through his wife. We were having a conversation, Bernadette Hunter and I. Bernadette, as you probably know, is my right arm. So we were talking with Paula, and in the conversation, she talked about her husband, Kevin Reilly. And even though he's a famous author, a speaker, he speaks all over the country, former NFL player, I didn't know who he was. But as soon as Bernadette heard his name, she remembered that he spoke at her son's school. And it was one of those engagements where they invited all of the kids and their parents. And she said, Patti, I will never forget Kevin's message. So she took it upon herself to call him. And she just wanted to let him know what a difference he had made in her son's life and in her life as well. And in the conversation, she brought up a young woman who was kind of going through a bit of a struggle from a career perspective. And knowing Kevin and his real goal in life to make a difference in young people's lives, she asked if he would be interested or would he be willing to talk with her. And Kevin Reilly, being Kevin Reilly, said, absolutely. And what I learned about this conversation was it was a 3-hour meeting, mostly laughing and some crying. And by the end of it, this young woman had a clear direction, a career path, and a new friend. What's interesting about this story is that young woman was my daughter. I have to tell you that as a professional, somebody running a company, etc., you think, or I think, gee, I hope I'm there for my kids. But sometimes they need to meet with people outside of the family nucleus. And to have somebody, a complete stranger, honestly, to spend that kind of time to meet with her and help her. And then on top of it, you guys, literally has been back in touch with her. How you doing? What can I do? How can I help? They've developed a relationship over time. And what I've also learned since that conversation, I basically said to Bernadette, I said, Bern, this guy's amazing. I'd like to meet him. I'd like to learn more about him. And of course, in the conversation, I learned about his book. I read his book. It's called Tackling Life. For those of you who are listening and not able to watch, I will tell you that if you were, you would see that Kevin Reilly is a 4-quarter amputee. He was a Philadelphia Eagle, and during his time with the NFL was diagnosed with a devastating tumor. So Kevin, geez, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, don't feel too bad, Patti, about not knowing who I was. After about 4 weeks of dating Paula, she had the nerve to ask me what position I played. And I thought, well, what position do you think I played? And she thought for a second and she said, left out. Well, there's no such position, but if it ever has a new position in the NFL, maybe we can call it left out. But anyway, I really appreciate being here today. And one of my great experiences was talking to your daughter and trying to help people along the way. It's very fulfilling and humbling for me to be able to help people. So I'm really happy to be here with you today and discuss some things that maybe you and I can help some other people out there that are struggling right now.
It's so interesting because some of you may be watching and listening and say, well, gee, what does this have to do with financial planning? What does this really have to do with what you do for a living? And I will tell you that it has so much to do with what we do because let's face it, anxiety, depression is rampant in our country today. And there's so much to worry about, whether it be COVID or long COVID, whether it be cybersecurity and, an attack on our systems, whether it be the electric grid or what have you, the implications on our economy and the markets, new tax laws, dysfunction in Washington, D.C. Boy, let's just make a list of all the things things that can keep us up at night. And when I asked Kevin, I said, Kevin, when you think about this conversation and when you look back on it, what would make you feel like it was really worthwhile? What would you like the message to be? Why don't you share with everybody what you said to me?
Well, perspective is one of the things that, brought me out of the doldrums. I'm a 4-quarter amputee, as you said, and that means I've lost my left shoulder, my left arm, and 4 ribs. And I was only 29 years old when that happened. I had 3 children, 2, 1, an infant. And the first day that I was back out of intensive care, I was looking at their pictures, and I was, in a position at that time with a lot of the tubes out of me, just to be thinking about the future. And it didn't look very bright to me. Here I am, 29 years old. The doctor comes in, and I'm dying to talk to him, and he says, "You were under the knife for 11 and a half hours. We had to, sew you back up because your vital signs were going down." And I said, "Well, was it successful?" He said, "I think I got it all." I'll never forget him saying that because my heart dropped. What do you mean you think you got it all? You just put me under an 11 and a half hour operation. I said, and I've lost my left arm and my shoulder. I don't know how I'm ever going to make a living again. I'm sitting here looking at these 3 kids, wondering if I'll have a job. Will I have to go on permanent disability? Just the thing that you were talking about. Here I was taking a deep dive down the rabbit hole, thinking all of the things that could happen. And I think it was Mark Twain that once said, some of our biggest worries in life never, ever happen to us. And if you take that into consideration, you wonder then, well, what should I be worried about? And an interesting concept came up just this week from a friend of mine, Father Rob Hagan, who is the Villanova chaplain. And he gave Mass the morning of our game Saturday. And he just put something in really good perspective. And he talked about there are too many things in this United States going on. We all have like the 2-minute drill right up to our face. It's like we have pressure on us all the time. And he said, you've got to pick 4 or 5 things that you're all in with. That's where you dedicate your time. Not all these little things that don't matter. Not only 5 days down the road, but 5 weeks down the road and 5 years down the road. And some of your biggest concerns will be the nights you lost sleep over little things. And he said, if you think about it, they should be in an area like my God. It should be an area like my family, things to be all in. My health, my brothers and sisters, black, white, in different cultures, different religions. Hey, even different political parties, which has become, just a bad situation right now. And, if you think about that, yeah, you can't handle everything today. So let's put it in perspective and think about the things you really need to think about and the things you really covet. One of the things that I was with Coach Dick Vermeil, we speak sometimes together, and he opened it to some Q&A after his speech. And a lady said to him, let me ask you something. If somebody asked you about integrity, how important would you say integrity is? And very, very calmly, and in one sentence, he said, if you have integrity, it's everything. If you don't have integrity, it's everything. And I think that should be one of your top models. And if you have integrity, then you go through your list of your God, your family, the people you deal with on a daily basis. Those are the things that are important. Those are the things that will fulfill your life when all of these things that we look at as, special toys, nice houses, that's all well and good. But if you're not getting pleasure out of fulfilling, obligations and being good to people and giving back, you're really missing the point. Cardinal George of Chicago had a great saying on his deathbed. He said, the only thing we take from this life when we die is what we give to others. And when you think about it, you're in financial planning. There might be a couple $1 million left behind, but they're not going to put it on a tractor trailer to bring in to throw on your funeral. Right. So if you think about that, everything else will have a way of falling in place. Your financial stability, your love life, your job. And the other thing that I'd say, if you had to put a 6th thing in their perspective, is just try to be kind on a daily basis to everybody you meet. I'm a big proponent of when somebody is angry with you or you're having a problem, and they call it being a Karen or a Kevin today. I don't know why I would get that look. But It's never about you. It's about them. They've just hit their last straw. They just had enough for the day because of so many priorities that we've put in front of ourselves to try to, progress.
It's so true. As you were talking, Kevin, I was thinking about something that I wrote about recently in one of my letters, and this concept of fear, right? And using the acronym FEAR, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. Or another one is future events already ruined. How's that for a concept? When my kids were younger, we used to do this thing called a brain dump because, these are tools that we all need to use from time to time. So in our family, the brain dump was quite simple. My kids would get a blank piece of paper, and I would have them take a pen to this piece of paper and write down everything that they were worried about, everything that they were thinking about, and keep writing until they were spent. They couldn't think of one more thing. And then they would fold it up, put it in an envelope, and put it away for 6 months. 6 months later, to the day, they would open it. I wouldn't look at it. It was private, but they would open it. And the question that I would have them answer is, how many of those things that you were so worried about actually occurred? And those that did, how bad was it? I don't know about you, but for me, I found that the things that happened that may have not turned out the way I wanted, boy, have I made mistakes in my life. Have things been harder in some respects than I had hoped that they would be? But that's when I really learned. That's when I really grew. And I think that sometimes is missing, that, we don't need to avoid adversity. We need to mitigate it. We need to be aware of it. But, things are going to happen. And it's not the things that happen to us, it's what we do about it, right? It's how often do we get back up? What do we do? How do we handle ourselves with that integrity that you were just talking about while it's happening? Are we pointing fingers at other people? Are we blaming other people? Or are we taking in the information and saying, what can I do now going forward to turn this thing around? What can I do to make a difference? People have lots of opinions in America today. People have lots of thoughts. And, I'm not here to change anybody's mind about anything, but what I try to do is listen and understand their perspective. It's funny because I feel like that people like you and hopefully me, I don't know that I'm at your level, Kevin, but hopefully when it's all said and done, that people will look and say, she had a way of influencing people with integrity to, kind of help people to see that perspective that you were talking about. And that failure is not a person. Get rid of that label. It's an event. It's feedback. It just tells you, hey, what you did didn't work. Let's try something else, right?
Absolutely. And, when you talk about it, you and I were talking a little earlier about the fear of falling out of where you are right now because you're comfortable. At least you know how to handle it, even if you're not happy. You know how to handle this area. We're always afraid of the unknown. Not so much the future, or sometimes more than the future, but more about the past. Well, what happens if I lose my job? Well, I don't think anybody is going to be sleeping outside in the rain and snow if they lose their job. But they think that might happen, or they think it might come to that consequence. It reminds me of a little story, again, a lesson learned. Here I am, missing my left arm, okay? And I became a peer visitor for Walter Reed Hospital, trying to help some of these poor guys coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq that have lost limbs. And at that time, Walter Reed Hospital was almost exclusively amputees. Governor Carper, he was a Navy veteran, asked me if I'd get down and talk to him. So I get down and I talk to him at this one point, and there's about 12 people there in the room that are doing rehab work, all levels of amputations. And you know what I didn't expect? I didn't expect to see women. Mm-hmm. And there were 2 women there, and I'm thinking, my gosh, these, bombs that go off to blow the cars up, they're very indiscriminate. They don't care. It could be women, it could be men, it could be dogs, it could be babies. They just don't care. And to make a long story short, I said, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through the 8-hour training program that they call Peer Visitor. I want to help these guys and gals. And so after my peer visitor training, and you have to be blessed to get your certificate. They want to make sure that you know what you're talking about. One of the biggest things is they stress over and over, God gave you 2 ears to listen, more than one mouth to talk. And, it's all about listening to the other person. So here I am, and they said the best usage of your time, Kev, because you can't get down to Maryland 3 times a week. And that's what it really takes to be a good peer visitor, because those guys and gals are going to tell you things they're not going to tell their family, their doctors. They said where you could really help us is because you work for a Fortune 500 company and you do hiring. These people are really scared when they go out looking for jobs. And so when we release them from the hospital, and by the way, they wouldn't release them until they did their DLAs, daily living activities. And you had to be able to cook 5 meals. If you were going to drive a car, there was a simulator there. So they were anxious to go home. But I'll tell you, the service was really good in saying, we're going to give them basic skills. So here I was to help them with, doing interviewing skills and also looking at their resume and giving them some advice about the interview they're going to go to. Well, one day comes and I meet my first triple amputee. He's a captain. He's a Marine. He's missing both legs below the knee and his left arm. And he's missing his left eye. Okay. And I'm sitting there, and this guy has the greatest attitude you'd ever want to see. He's so happy that his uniform fits him like he wanted it to. He's so happy to be going home. He's got 3 interviews. He can't wait for me to tell him how to handle himself. And the guy's like, I'm going, how does this happen? Because a lot of the times when I go in to see somebody that's just lost a limb because of cancer, they're usually down. And that's because people set low expectations for them. Their family members, their friends, they mean well, but their empathy is setting the bar low. And this guy, because he was a Marine, because he was in with other Marines rehabilitating, there's a camaraderie there, an esprit de corps that can't be touched. So he says to me about 20 minutes into the conversation, can I ask you a personal question? I said, sure. He said, did you lose your dominant arm or your non-dominant arm? I said, I was lucky. I lost my non-dominant arm. How about you? He said, yeah, I lost my non-dominant arm also. Aren't we lucky? I'm not even in this guy's same arena.
Wow.
And he is putting me up there with him. And I learned a lesson that day. If he doesn't feel bad about his chances in this world, I'm never going to feel bad about it. And that's when I, go back to a saying that Rocky Blyer, who counseled me while I was at my worst day at Sloan Kettering, he said, your job going forward is to be the best one-arm person that you can be.
Wow.
Okay, so you try everything until you find out you can't do it. When I was in the hospital, I had a intentioned volunteer who was 70 years old who came to visit me. And he had this knife that was called an Alaska knife. You can rock it back and forth and you can cut your food with it. And he said, make sure you take this when you go out to dinner dates because you don't want to look like a 12-year-old and have your partner next to you cutting your meat up. Oh my goodness, didn't even think about that. Then he's talk about his shoes. He said, you're going to get back to work with Xerox? I said, yes, I am. All right, what do you do I said, I'm an executive. You have to wear a coat and tie? I said, yeah. He said, do you have to wear dress shoes? I said, yeah, just like the pair you have on. And with that, he said, not like this pair. I said, yeah, I got a pair of wingtips just like yours. Those funny little strings, too, that they call laces. He said, not like this pair. I said, maybe they're not the right size. They're the same color. Wingtips are wingtips. He said, give me your hand for a second. And with that, he took my hand and he put it on this little flap that I didn't see. And he said, pull up on it. And when I did, it was a Velcro flap. He said, if you're going to have to wear wingtips like this, you're going to have to get the pre-tied one like mine because you'll never be able to tie your shoes again. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, I've been trying for over 30 years. And then he said to me, pull on my tie. And at that point, I was really glad that he didn't ask me to pull on his finger, but I pulled on his tie, and it was one of those clip-on ties that I had going to Catholic school. My mother couldn't tie in my tie because we had 6 kids in the family, and I was the oldest. And that's another story for another day, but I never slept alone until I was married. But anyway, he said, you'll never be able to tie your tie again. And if you go down to 5th and Madison Avenue, they'll give you a discount. And make sure you get about 12 or 13, 14 ties because they always call me back. I want to know, what's the name of that place again? And so when he left, I went, oh, my gosh. I said, what else can I do? And I'm thinking of buttons and zippers and keyboards. Oh, my. And here was a guy that had well-meaning, but he came and he set the bar low. And when I told the story to Rocky Blyer, he said, you must promise me something. He's on the phone with me. He said, you must promise me that you won't quit on anything unless you try it a dozen times. I said, hey, Rock, listen, I love your enthusiasm, but let me tell you something. This guy's got to be a little more of an expert than you or I with being one-armed. He said, let me tell you about experts, Riles. Experts built the Titanic and amateurs built the Ark. Experts can be wrong. And he made me promise that I wouldn't quit on anything until I tried it a dozen times. And then he said, I'm going to send you a little poem. Now, Rocky Bleier, for you fans out there that don't recognize the name, 4-time Super Bowl winner, and he had his leg so badly mangled with a bomb in Vietnam that they said he would never, ever play football again. But he didn't buy it, got the right people, took him 2 years to rehab it, used some cadaver parts to put back in his bad knee, and he not only made the team, he's got 4 Super Bowl rings. So here was a guy I could listen to that had overcome major adversity. And he said to me, I'm going to send you a little poem, and I want you to memorize it. And instead of stepping back and counting to 10 before you take on the task again, and you're going to be frustrated. You're an A personality just like me. It's going to be difficult. But I want you to say this little poem to yourself. And it goes like this. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but you think you can't, it's almost a cinch that you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For in this world we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You got to think high to rise. You got to be sure of yourself before you can win the prize. Remember, life's battles don't always go to the biggest, fastest, or smartest man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. And I followed that philosophy. There are 3 things I can't do. I cannot play the banjo, I cannot jump rope by myself, and I cannot give the number 1 sign left-handed to angry motorists on 202. But I was told I would never be able to go in a half marathon again. I was told, don't even think about hitting golf balls. You'll have a bad back. This, that, and the other. And I found out so many of those things I could do if I adapted. And so many of those things, without Rocky Bleier there that day, everybody had set the bar low. And for our listening and watching audience, I just want people to think, aim for the top. If you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. And if you aim beyond your ability, wherever you fall will be better than anything you could have ever achieved by not trying at all.
I just want you to keep on talking. For those of you who are listening, I want you all to know that if you get a chance, you have to watch the video, because while Kevin was talking, he was tying his tie with one arm. It's an amazing thing to watch. And he was talking at the same time. It's so interesting. It's fascinating, Kevin, to hear your story and to hear this kind of approach that you've taken to life. I'm just kind of curious. Were you this way before you had the tumor?
Yeah, I was in many ways. And part of that was, growing up in a large family, I was supposed to be the leader. And, I tried to play that role. And, my Catholic education gave me a pretty good moral compass. But I would have to tell you, it's the Salesianum experience, the 4 years at the all-boys school, was really the factor that set me on the right road. One of the things that happened in that environment that people don't know unless you're in it is that you can't be anybody but yourself. They will call you out.
Wow.
Okay, so if you're a fraud, if you're lying, if you're lack of integrity, they will call you out. And you will change because that is more embarrassing than changing.
Interesting.
And I have seen it in other all-male schools, and I'm sure that in all-female schools, much of the same thing. The camaraderie's there. Salesianum calls it the brotherhood. And, let me tell you about the brotherhood. I bled out during my operation. They put a flag up that anybody wanted to give blood. And I had 11 guys that I played football with at Villanova, NFL, and Salesianum. 5 of them were from Salesianum that caravanned up to give me blood. Now, a couple of them I didn't want their blood. But, that's the way it goes. But, that's how they care.
Wow.
What more can you do for another human being than give your own precious blood? So it's that kind of stuff right there that keeps me up, above. I try to tell people, this 1972 Miami Dolphins that drafted me after they won a Super Bowl, they won undefeated that year. And it hasn't happened since. It's a rarity. And it will only happen in football because baseball, soccer, hockey, and they play too many games. Basketball, too many games for anybody to go undefeated. But I want to tell you something. People think that they should go undefeated in life. And there isn't a person yet that has gone undefeated in life. And I say that in a positive stance because you just mentioned it a while ago. When you have a problem and you deal with that problem and you face that adversity, if you didn't learn a couple lessons, shame on you. And dig yourself out and say, I'm going to be better than this. And, I'm going to work at it. And again, you have to set your goals. And you can't set them all over the place. If people would ask you tomorrow, name the 5 things that are important to you, you ought to be able to rattle them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And remind yourself, this is what's important.
Wow. So true. And, this is the message that needs to be spread. I said to you before the podcast, and we were talking about this, what would you like the listeners to get out of this? If there's a phrase, if there's something that you really want them to remember, what would it be?
With everything that's going on in this country, it's still the best country in the world. More out of, pocket thoughts, more, as they say, people that are thinking beyond the block, okay? Why are we able to make so many inventions? Why are we able to create so many new things? China's got 5 times as many people as we got, I think, or something like that. But they're under duress because of the, lack of freedom that they have.
Right.
And freedom in this country is so important to allow you to do whatever you want to do, even though, as you said earlier, your opinion is different than mine on this subject, but that's okay. And the one thing I would just like people to remember is this, is just try to be kinder out there to everybody. Everybody's going through tough times out there. And you won't know until you do it how often it'll come back and help you.
Kevin, as you were talking, I was thinking about something that I wrote about in my most recent letter. We hear about all the negative stuff, right? But, when you think about it, 50 years ago, about half of the world's population was in extreme poverty. Today, it's about 9%. Every second, one person is lifted out of extreme poverty, but in that same second, 5 people are lifted into the middle class. The progress that we are making on a daily, yearly basis, I wish we could measure that and make that the headlines, because there's a lot to look forward to, and there's a lot to, just kind of be in awe about. The progress, it's not arithmetic, it's geometric. So there is so much that we can look forward to, so much for our children to look forward to. And, let's kind of focus on that, right? And as we look at adversity, and I think that your message, nobody goes undefeated in life.
Right.
It is all about perspective, and there's nobody better than Kevin Reilly to share that message.
Well, I'm no saint, no by any means, and I'm 70 years old now, and I'm probably more humble than I've ever been, and I'd like to even get humbler, because when I look back, I'm not so proud of some of the things I did, but it's a reminder that, you don't have to always talk your own track up. And I say that because we live in this great country, and the technology is moving so fast and in such a good direction for cures. The desmoid tumor disease that I have, we think that in 2 years we may have a cure for it.
Wow.
And we have 2 medicines right now that are shrinking the tumors, but they can't kill it. So we're looking for the silver bullet. 15 years ago, this thing was just strangling people. So I look at it like you do. It's just a blessing that way. People ask me now, what do you miss being one-armed? I miss hitting a baseball. I miss hugging people with 2 arms. It's not things you would think about, off the top of your head. And I told somebody the other day when they called me about possibly trying this prosthetic arm because they wanted a former athlete to do it. I said, I don't want to learn that now. I said, you know what, I want to tell you something, and I really appreciate your call, but if God gave me my left arm back right now, it would get in my way for 2 months. I'm so used to not having it. And so, I just ask people to look in perspective of what they have, and don't be afraid to climb the ladder and reach your goals. We're going to be accountable someday for the talents that God gave us. And you got to sit back sometime and say, am I using the talents that, the God or the supreme being, whoever you call that in your life, am I using them to the best of my ability, or am I just trying to stay safe? And a lot of that can be broken by just trying to help other people with whatever talent you have.
Wow, Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you for that message. So much powerful stuff for all of us to think about, related to our daily lives and the people that we interact with and how we handle ourselves, right? Thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Appreciate being on the show.
It's a real treat. And thanks to all of you as well for joining us today. If you have any questions, if you'd like to learn more, my first recommendation, if I may, is get this book. This book is amazing. Kevin is out there spreading this message to companies like mine and large companies, Fortune 500 companies. He's willing to help on whatever level. And I will tell you, from my perspective, you've helped me a lot today. So thank you for everything that you do. Thanks to all of you for joining us. If you have any questions, go to our website, www.keyfinancialinc.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving surrounded with the people that you love. Take care now. Bye-bye.